Hey guys, and welcome to another WoW Weekly with Myst, and for this week's events, it's pretty mellow to be perfectly honest. It is pet battles, the PvP brawl will be Shaltan Showdown, and then we also have Arena Skirmish. So those are the three events going on this week. Okay, so I got a few days worth of hotfixes for you guys here. So starting with January 4th hotfixes, we have some changes to the paladin, some changes to the rogue. Dragon riding had an issue where an error would happen when you would take off sometimes. That's been fixed. And some dungeon and raid changes. Feel free to check the screen. I'm not gonna read over it all. There's a lot. And then some changes to some raid trinkets as well. And a good chunk of profession changes. Next, the hotfixes for January 5th. Some changes to the druid, the evoker, and some more to the paladin. An additional change to tarots in Vault of Incarnates. This one just applies to LFR difficulty, though. Just reduces the damage of the rock blast by 44%. And then a couple of extra things you can read on screen. And then the most recent hotfix was put in on the 6th. And that has to do with 3 of the trinkets. So there's Bone Maw's Big Toe, Eye of Skavald, and Idol of Trampling Hooves. And the damage from all 3 of these have been buffed by 10%. And that concludes our list of hotfixes for this week. Next up, a bit of sad news. But there was a death this past week. It was Earl Boen. I think I said his last name right. Boen. He passed away this past week at the age of 81. He's been in tons of stuff. I personally remember him as the guy in the Terminator movies. But he did also voice a pretty popular character in World of Warcraft, which is why we're mentioning it in WoW Weekly this week. He was the original game narrator, and he also was Magtheridon in BC and Legion. He was also Hakima the Wise in Cataclysm. And then he also voiced King Terenaz in Wrath of the Lich King. And as far as my opinion goes, I consider this to be the most popular line ever in World of Warcraft. There's a lot of them, don't get me wrong, but this one definitely stands out way above all of them. So here's a clip. And I'm just gonna run the whole scene because it's a great scene.
Father, is it over?
At long last. No king rules forever, my son.
I see. Only darkness before me.
Without its master's command, the restless scourge will become an even greater threat to this world. Control must be maintained. There must always be a Lich King. The weight of such a burden. It must be mine, for there is no other.
Tyrion! You hold a grim destiny in your hands, brother. But it is not your own.
Bulva! By all that is holy.
The dragon's flame. Seal my fate. The world of the living can no longer comfort me. Place the crown upon my head, Tyrion. Forevermore, I will be the jailer of the damned.
No, old friend. I cannot.
Do it, Tyrion! You and these brave heroes have your own destinies to fulfill. This last act of service is mine.
You will not be forgotten, brother.
I must be forgotten, Tyrion. If the world is to live free from the tyranny of fear, they must never know what was done here today. Tell them only that the Lich King is dead, and that Bolvar Dragon died with him. Now, go. Leave this place, and never return.
And the last piece of news I have for retail, the Dragon Shard of Knowledge quest skip has returned. Now, basically what happened is, like, early in Dragonflight, if you had an alt who had completed the Dragon Isles branch quests to open up the ability to turn in Dragon Shard of Knowledges to Caden in Anarin, then any characters afterwards would be, they would have the option to skip that. Now, I've only really brought one alt in. I've been doing all my stuff on my main. I'm very much a main character, and then the alts come in like later. Yeah, I like to do as much as possible on my one main character first. So I only really brought in my mage, and the only reason I brought in my mage was because I needed her alchemy for my main, right? So everything comes down to, what does my main need, and then we decide, right? So because of that, that was really close to the beginning of Dragonflight, and so it still existed then. So I had no idea that they removed it after, because I haven't brought another alt in yet. And yeah, I've been meaning to, my Jewel Crafter is kind of like the next one on the list. I just haven't gotten there yet. I just have the 2 sitting at max level right now. But point is that I guess they removed it after I had leveled mine. And so I had no idea. So, moral of the story is it was removed and now it's back. So, if you're like me and didn't know it was removed to begin with, then nothing's happening here, no biggie. But I can see how people would notice right off the bat, because, the reality is, what else are people doing, right? It's a pretty mellow expansion. And I imagine that people are, like, leveling their alts, they're just getting all your alts caught up. And yeah, so you would notice that missing right away. For me personally, it's so early in, I probably wouldn't have even thought twice about the skip. I like having the skip, but I feel it's more a need halfway through the expansion. It's cool that it's there. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. It's cool that it's there, but I personally don't really look for the skips early in because I'm still like checking out the new stuff, right? So, yeah. Plus, it doesn't matter. You skip that, you're still gonna be max level before you get to the last zone. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. So you don't get the experience from those quests and you get it elsewhere, you know? Like, honestly, the leveling's so fast. I'm not even a power leveler, and I can be leveled in a day or two. And I do not power level whatsoever. Yeah, that's casual leveling I can do in like a day or two in Dragonflight. And then, like I said earlier, you don't even hit all the zones. Both my druid and my mage had only been to 2 zones by the time they hit max level. Granted, I do all the side quests and stuff, but still. But as a quick little side note on the topic of leveling, this past week and still for today, if you're watching on Monday, we had time walking. And time walking has always been something I used for my alts for leveling. I no longer do, and there's one reason for that, and that's Time Reaver. I got it in Shadowlands, so, pretty much I have called it unless there's a quest that issues my character decent gear, which it is decent right now early into Dragonflight. Might not be the case later on in the expansion as you get more gear, but it is good right now. And as far as leveling your alts in it, it's better than last expansion. I still feel like the best was BFA. I loved leveling my alts in Time Walking in the BFA expansion. It was amazing levels. And yeah, it seemed to change when they squished the level down. Yeah, that's when I really noticed the difference. With that said, it's slightly better than Shadowlands. So it's a way to level. I wouldn't say it's the best way to level, but if you are bored of doing other things, time walking can be a good way to level, especially if you're going after Time Reaver. Like I said, I don't really do the time walking leveling alt scenario now because I have the mount, and the mount was always the reason I went in. But if you don't have the mount, I always leveled all my alts through that. And fairly easy. Every time it came around, I'd just hop on an alt and farm out the dungeons until they got max level and move on to the next. And yeah. So it's definitely a good way to level if you're bored of the current content that you're doing for leveling. But I wouldn't say it's the best way. I personally will always say that current content is the best way because in current content, there's new things to get that I have very, very frequently accidentally stumbled upon while leveling an alt. So I feel like if you're a progression type person and you don't need anything out of time walking, it's better to level in current because you're gonna progress more out of doing those levels out there. But it depends the way you're looking at it, right? I'm looking at it as like the full picture. Some people, and I'd say most people, only look at it as how many levels can I get. Okay, so that is it for retail news. Some classic news. So one big thing I've been doing this week is I've been in Classic. I haven't been in like every day or anything. It's been this expansion's weird for me. Like I'm playing it, but like I'm not hooked, like yeah. But anyway, Classic. The Joyous Journeys buff, for those that don't know, it came back like mid-December. They brought it back on December 13th. And it's getting ready to vanish. So it's gonna vanish on January 16th, which gives us exactly a week left of this buff. For those that never took advantage of the Joyous Journeys buff before, we actually had it at the end of Classic BC to prep people going into Wrath. And it's a really good buff. It's 50% bonus experience. First, I was a little worried that they had brought it back so early, because it usually implies bad things. And the reality is, yeah, of course, Classic was suffering a bit. Dragonflight just came out. A lot of people have been hyped for Dragonflight. I personally feel like Dragonflight gets a lot of hype right now because it's a lot of people who haven't played WoW in a lot of years. So of course they like it. They haven't been in the game for a long time. So that, of course, probably brought a lot of Classic players in. Whether they're gonna stay or not is a whole different story. But the moral of this story is that it would have dragged some Classic players to retail. Now, this is the good part of having Classic, is because really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to Blizzard. It's a shared sub. And at that point, who cares where they are? It's a win no matter what, right? Like, as long as they're either in Classic or retail, you're still winning. So that's the way I see it. But point is, I think they just want more people back over in Classic, and honestly, I think they're just a little ahead of themselves. I'm glad the buff exists and I'm taking good use of it. But, Dragonflight's still pretty new. Like, this was bound to happen. Just give it a bit. People will be back over in Classic, honestly, Dragonflight, unless they change things along the way and, honestly change what they told us Dragonflight was going to be to begin with, it's not really going to carry a whole lot of people. I know a lot of people that plan on playing multiple games this expansion, and it's because even if you're a collector, there's still a lot less to do in Dragonflight. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about those numbers staying low on the Classic side of things. So last week of the buff, and that's where I'm gonna be this week in streams. So yeah, I want to take good advantage of this. My druid's been really close for a while because I did level at the beginning of Wrath. And then Dragonflight stuff started coming out. Like, I started doing, some beta coverage and all that. And that's kind of what halted it. But before that, I had leveled my druid from 70 to 77. And she's now 78. And yeah, I just gotta get a couple more levels. And really, it's only the druid I truly care about as far as levels, but it would be nice to, to get a couple of other characters. Well, I don't know if I'd get a couple other characters in a week. And honestly, I don't think this is the last time we'll see the Joyous Journeys buff, so I could always polish off another character way later. Also, on the topic of raids, they did announce that the Naxx achievements in Classic will not be removed in Phase 2. So you'll still be able to get it in the next tier. The achievements include Gloria the Raider, Immortal, and Undying. A lot of people are ticked about this one, it seems, from what I've read. Mainly because the Plagued Proto-Drake is in there. Definitely a mount that I always wished I had gotten back in the day. You had to be sociable, which was like part of my biggest problem. I have been like such a solo player for the past 18 years in this game. I do my raids and stuff. And I think I became more sociable when M+ came into the picture, because then there was a second thing that I had to be sociable with. But for the most part, the only time you saw me really being sociable was like to be in the raid, and I always had my mic muted anyway. And yeah, like, you know, that's for the Plagued Proto Drake, the Immortal title, and the Undying title. And it sounds like they're just gonna keep it available throughout the entire Wrath Classic. So you definitely got time to do it, but if you are worried about missing out, definitely push it. But it does sound like it won't go away until Wrath ends. So that calls it for this video. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.